When George Whitman stepped off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport, the humid air wrapped around him like a damp towel. He'd imagined Thailand as a paradise: golden beaches, genuine smiles, and a cost of living that felt like a dream. The land of smiles, the travel brochures had promised him. After 40 long years as an accountant in gray, rainy Manchester, George felt he deserved a little sunshine. His pension wasn't huge, but in Thailand, it was supposed to be more than enough. Online forums were filled with cheerful retirees, boasting about beers for £1 and massages for half that. "You'll live like a king," they all seemed to say. So George took the leap. He sold his small house, packed up his life into a few suitcases, and flew east with a one-way ticket and a heart full of dreams of endless sunsets. The taxi ride from Bangkok to Pattaya was his first real taste of the chaos. Motorbikes weaved through traffic like determined mosquitoes, and neon lights blinked, "Happy massage" every 50 meters. His driver, a talkative man named Lek with a smile full of gold teeth, grinned and asked, "You like party? Pattaya #1. George just chuckled politely. Honestly, he was more interested in peace than parties. He found a small apartment near the beach. It was a simple concrete box with peeling paint, a bed that sagged in the middle, and a fan that coughed dust whenever it started up. But from his small balcony, he could see the sea, a glittering blue ribbon under the sun. For George, at that moment, that was enough. For the first few months, everything felt like a grand adventure. He learned how to order pad thai and a cold Chang beer in broken, hesitant Thai. He even found a community, joining a group of expats who met at a local bar called the English Rose. They were mostly sunburned men with big bellies and small ambitions who spent their days swapping stories about failed marriages and dodgy visas. But after a while, the novelty started to thin. The laughter at the bar began to sound hollow, and the smiles on the bar girls' faces seemed more tired than welcoming. George started to see the cracks in his new paradise. This cheap paradise wasn't nearly as cheap as he'd been led to believe. His rent rose each year, seemingly without reason. The visa rules changed unpredictably, and each renewal required new fees that were never officially documented. He saw friends suddenly get deported. One acquaintance disappeared entirely after a simple dispute with his landlord. The dream was slowly souring. Then came the illness. It started as a persistent cough, which soon turned into sharp chest pains. The local clinic smiled, charged him 3,000 baht, and gave him antibiotics that did nothing. He decided to go to a private hospital, where a doctor in a crisp white coat handed him a bill that made his hands tremble. "You need surgery," the doctor said calmly, "but you must pay in advance." He called his bank back in England, a wave of panic washing over him. His savings were dwindling far faster than he'd ever realized. The exchange rate had shifted against him. His pension, which once felt so substantial, now barely covered his rent. Still, the thought of going back was unbearable. "I'll die where it's warm," he muttered to himself. "Not under those bloody gray skies." To save money, he had to make a drastic change. He moved inland to a small town that tourists never visited. There were no lively bars or sandy beaches here, just relentless heat and the constant whine of mosquitoes. The locals would smile at him, a polite but distant gesture, but they rarely spoke to him. He was an outsider again, only this time he was older and felt profoundly lonelier. The house he rented looked idyllic from the outside, surrounded by palm trees, banana plants, and even a small murky pond. But at night, the jungle came alive. Howling stray dogs, croaking frogs, and insects so large they sounded like they were knocking on the door. One evening, he found a snake coiled in his bathroom, its eyes cold and unnervingly patient. He screamed until a neighbor came running with a machete. The neighbor laughed as he dragged the snake away. "Welcome to Thailand," he said cheerfully. It didn't feel welcoming at all. The months began to blur into a monotonous cycle. George grew thinner and his cough grew worse. a rattling sound that echoed in the small, damp house. With his money almost gone, he sold his last few valuables, his watch, his laptop, just to pay the rent. His landlady, a polite woman named Som, started visiting him more often. She would bring food and sometimes local medicine. Her teenage son would call him Lung Farang, Uncle Foreigner. One night during the monsoon season, the rains came down with a vengeance. Water poured through the leaky roof, flooding the floor. Lightning split the sky in brilliant white flashes, followed by deafening thunder. The power went out for hours. When it finally flickered back on, George's fever had skyrocketed. He could barely stand. Zoom found him the next morning, shivering uncontrollably in his soaked sheets. She immediately took him to the district hospital, a place that smelled of bleach and quiet despair. The nurses moved slowly, and the ceiling fans just clicked overhead, stirring the hot, heavy air. The doctor glanced at his chart and sighed. Lung infection. It's serious. How much? George croaked, the words scratching his throat. The doctor wrote a number on a scrap of paper and pushed it towards him. It might as well have been a death sentence. Som tried to comfort him. Maybe the embassy can help, she suggested softly. But George just shook his head. His passport had expired. His visa was long overstayed. In the eyes of the law, he was invisible, a ghost haunting a paradise he no longer recognized. In his final week, he dreamed constantly. He saw beaches glowing red at sunset, heard laughter echoing like mockingbirds, and even the distant voice of his ex-wife calling him home. But there was no home left to go to. On his last morning, the sun finally broke through the rain clouds. Som sat beside his hospital bed, holding his frail hand. "You like Thailand?" she asked gently. George managed a weak smile. "It's heaven," he whispered, though his eyes told a completely different story. He passed away before noon, just as the monks from the local temple began their afternoon chants. Som arranged for a simple cremation. A few of the old expats from the English Rose showed up, sweating in their crumpled shirts, muttering about how poor old George just couldn't hack it. That night, back at the bar, the girls poured a beer onto the ground for him, a Thai gesture of respect for the departed. The foam hissed as it hit the sand, then disappeared. The very next day, life went on. New tourists arrived at the airport, beaches glittered under the sun, and another retiree stepped off a plane at Suvarnabhumi, his eyes bright with the same dreams George once had. Pattaya never sleeps. It only consumes. And somewhere in the hot wind that blows through Thailand's neon streets, maybe a whisper of George's story remains, a chilling reminder that paradise, for some, can be its own kind of hell. Thank you for watching. It's a sobering story, and it's a reminder to always do thorough research and have contingency plans, no matter where your dreams take you. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more content. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.